It was the morning of November 2005, in Robinson, Texas, a peaceful, close-knit small town south of Waco. But on this day, the quiet was suddenly shattered by a single phone call. A woman, her voice panicked and urgent, dialed 911 to report that something terrible had happened in her home. The details were unclear, but the tone of her voice said it all. Something was very, very wrong. This one call would open the door to a tragic story that shook an entire community, tore a family apart, and left the public stunned. This is the story of Darlene and Keith Gentry, a marriage full of love, hope, disappointment, and ultimately, deep unhappiness. Darlene Doscasile. Darlene Doscasile was born on November 2, 1974. She was the middle of 3 daughters in a loving family. Right from the start, her family saw something special in her. Relatives and friends described her as bright, disciplined, and full of life. A girl who wasn't just pretty on the outside, but also warm-hearted and ambitious. Growing up in Central Texas, Darlene quickly became a local favorite, known for her dazzling smile, blonde hair, and natural ability to connect with people. Even though she never officially held a beauty queen title, classmates and teachers lovingly called her the Texas Beauty Queen. She was voted prom queen, was a member of the Flag Corps, and was at the center of every school event. Her charm never seemed fake. It was real. Darlene stood out not just because of her looks, but because of her kindness. She made other people feel seen and valued, was admired by everyone, and loved by her family. Her path in life seemed clearly set. In 1993, she graduated from Yo High School in Cameron, and then enrolled at Texas State Technical College in Waco. Initially, she wanted to work in dentistry and began training as a dental assistant, but her long-term goal was to become a nurse. During this time, she met a young man who would change her life forever, Keith Gentry. Keith Gentry. Keith was born on September 2, 1974 in Waco, Texas, to Weeman and Glenda Gentry. He grew up in Robinson, a town where community and family were still very important. He had 2 sisters and a large, loving family. In high school, Keith was known for his quiet, friendly way. He wasn't a show-off and never looked for attention, but those who knew him valued his reliability and good character. He was a quiet but strong guy, the one you could always count on. Like Darlene, he also enrolled at Texas State Technical College, where he studied technical drawing and welding. Later, he got a steady job as a technical assistant at a power company, a secure, down-to-earth job, perfect for a family man like him. Keith had the heart of a provider, hard-working, responsible, and with clear plans for the future. Friends said he was a family man long before he even had a family. When Keith and Darlene met, the spark was instant. Their chemistry was obvious, and soon they fell in love. Both families were thrilled. Everyone expected them to get married soon. But like many young couples, their life plans didn't quite match up. By 1997, both had graduated and were facing the next steps in life. Darlene hoped for a marriage proposal, but Keith wasn't ready for marriage or living together yet. After several talks, they sadly decided to break up. Both were deeply hurt. To start fresh, Darlene moved to Dallas. She worked in the dental field again, but the busy city life wasn't for her. A car theft and the loneliness of the big city wore her down, and after a year, she moved back home. Fate stepped in again. She met Keith once more. This time, they didn't hesitate. They found their way back to each other, and in 1999, Keith finally proposed to her. Soon after, they got married. Everything seemed to have fallen into place. After their wedding in 1999, everything seemed to be going perfectly for Darlene and Keith Gentry. They bought their first home in Robinson, Texas, a quiet suburb south of Waco, and very close to Keith's parents' house, right next door. This closeness to family would later prove to be both comforting and challenging. Keith worked as a technical assistant for a local utility company, while Darlene initially worked in a dental office. But she soon realized that her heart was in a different profession. She went back to school to become a nurse, a goal she pursued with determination. Keith was proud of her and supported her in every way. Their lives were calm and orderly. In 2001, their first son Chase was born, followed by Cody in 2004, and finally their third son Cade in 2005. The family was considered loving, attractive, and exemplary, a perfect example of a young, happy family. Keith and Darlene seemed to have it all: 3 healthy children, a beautiful home, and stable jobs. But beneath the surface, small cracks began to show. Keith's job meant he traveled a lot for work. During these times, Darlene had to do everything by herself, taking care of the kids, running the house, working. She was always busy, as a mom, a wife, and a nurse. When Keith came home, he was often tired and just wanted to rest instead of helping Darlene. Things started to get tense. Keith finally realized that his job, with all its travel, was putting a lot of strain on his family, so he decided to take a less stressful job closer to home. But it came with less pay. It was a good idea, but it caused new problems. With less money coming in, their finances started to get shaky. Darlene, who liked to keep a nice home, plan parties, and shop, didn't really change how she spent money. Keith, on the other hand, became more and more worried. Fights about money became a regular thing. Friends and family noticed a change. The relationship that used to be so good was now often tense. But no one thought the situation was really serious. Both of them seemed determined to stay together. The morning of November 9th, 2005. In the early hours of November 9th, 2005, a panicked call came into Robinson's emergency center. The caller was Darlene Gentry. Her voice trembled as she explained that she had found her husband, Keith, covered in blood in their bed. The bedroom window or the back door, it was wide open, and some of Keith's weapons were missing. She told the police she hadn't spent the night in their shared bed. Her youngest son, just 18 months old, had been restless. So, she had gone to another room with him and her 2 older boys. She woke up shortly after 6 a.m., noticed the open door, and then went into the bedroom, where she found Keith lifeless, but still breathing. She reported pink foam at his mouth, a sign of very serious internal injuries. Paramedics arrived quickly. Keith was still alive, but he was unconscious and had a gunshot wound to the head. He was immediately taken to the hospital and put on life support. 2 days later, on November 11, 2005, doctors declared him brain dead. Keith Gentry was dead. The police started investigating right away. Since Darlene and the kids were the only ones in the house that night, she was the first suspect. Darlene was questioned that same day. She described the previous evening as mostly normal. She had met friends for dinner and drinks and came home around 8:30 p.m. There, an argument happened. Keith found a restaurant receipt and was angry because she had spent money despite their financial problems. Darlene left the house briefly to cool down and returned later. Keith went to bed, and she lay down with the children. Around 5:15 a.m., she heard the dog bark, but didn't think much of it. She only got up at 6 a.m. and found Keith, but the police doubted her story. The forensic evidence suggested that Keith had been shot much earlier. The amount of blood, the type of injuries, and his body temperature didn't match her timeline. Also, there were no signs of a break-in, no forced door, no broken window. And something else stood out. Darlene, a trained nurse, hadn't tried to revive him. She stayed in the room with the children instead of helping or running to meet the paramedics. Even the 911 call seemed strange. Not frantic, but unusually calm and explanatory, as if she was trying to justify her own story. After Keith died from his injuries on November 11, 2005, a mysterious incident became a murder case, and all the clues started pointing in one direction, at Darlene Gentry. Contradictions and initial suspicions. The investigators took another close look at her house. Darlene had claimed that a burglar broke into the house during the night, shot Keith, and stole several weapons. But at the crime scene, hardly anything matched that story. The supposedly stolen weapons were found behind the house, carefully laid out next to each other, not scattered or taken away. To the investigators, it looked like a staged scene, not a hurried robbery. Also, only two people knew where the key to the gun safe was: Keith and Darlene. A random burglar probably wouldn't have known that.
Her behavior after the murder was also strange. Darlene herself acted oddly. During the 911 call, she seemed unusually calm. Her voice was more like she was explaining something than being upset. And when the paramedics arrived, she hadn't given any first aid, even though as a nurse, she knew exactly what to do. Instead, she had locked herself in a room with the children and waited there. Soon after, she was taken to the police station for questioning. But as soon as the questions got more direct, she suddenly said she wanted to stay silent, using her Fifth Amendment right, and asked for a lawyer. The conversation stopped right away. Darlene later said she was innocent. She loved Keith and would never hurt him. Yes, there were money problems, but nothing that would lead to violence. But the police were now sure it wasn't a break-in, but something that was made to look like one. "I want a lawyer."
During another search of the house, investigators found something that completely changed the course of the investigation. In the kitchen trash, they discovered a pair of latex gloves. Inside one of the gloves was a .22 caliber casing, and both had traces of gunshot residue, as well as DNA from Darlene and Keith. This made it clear the gloves must have been worn during the crime, and whoever hid them in the trash afterward knew exactly what they meant. Then investigators stumbled upon another detail. Keith had taken out a life insurance policy worth between $500,000 and $750,000. Given the couple's financial difficulties, the case now took on a new dimension. Was money the motive? Was Keith's death a way to financially secure Darlene and the children, or to allow her to start fresh herself? The arrest. On November 28, 2005, just 19 days after the murder, Darlene Gentry was arrested for murder. But she was released the very same day. Keith's parents, who still trusted Darlene, paid her $50,000 bail. They didn't want to believe that their son's wife, the mother of their 3 grandchildren, was capable of such a crime. They stood by her, despite growing evidence. The pond and the telling secret. Soon after she was released, the case took an unexpected turn. Darlene got in touch with an acquaintance, Robert Pavavella, who owned some land near Axtell, Texas, with a small, lovely pond on it. She said the place reminded her of Keith, because he always dreamed of fishing there with the boys. A sweet thought, if that's all it had been. But a few weeks later, she called Pavavella again and suddenly asked him to fill in the pond. The request was so strange that he became suspicious. He told the police, and the officers decided to search the pond. What they found confirmed their suspicions. At the bottom of the pond was a .22 caliber pistol, the murder weapon that killed Keith. The trap. To clearly catch Darlene, the investigators decided to set a trap, and Pavavella helped them. He called Darlene and said he would soon drain the pond before filling it in. If anything was there, it would soon become visible. Darlene reacted calmly. She didn't deny anything, seemed relaxed and friendly. But the next day, under a hidden surveillance camera, she showed up at the pond, in rubber boots with a pole in her hand. She got into the water and started poking around there, exactly at the spot where the police had already found the weapon. Everything was filmed. The video became the crucial piece of evidence. In February 2007, a good 15 months after Keith's death, the trial against Darlene Gentry, then 32 years old, began. The case was heard in McLennan County, Texas. The charge was first-degree murder. Darlene was accused of shooting her husband while he slept in bed. The trial lasted only 5 days, but it deeply shook the community. The evidence. The most important piece of evidence was the surveillance video from the pond near Axtell. It showed Darlene in rubber boots, poking around in the water, exactly where the police had already found the murder weapon. In addition, there were the latex gloves with Darlene's and Keith's DNA, the .22 caliber shell casing, the staged crime scene, and her inconsistent behavior on the night of the murder. The prosecution argued that Darlene planned the murder and then staged the crime to make it look like a break-in. Her motive: money and freedom. She wanted to get out of the marriage, but at the same time, she was counting on Keith's life insurance. The defense, Darlene's lawyers, didn't call their own witnesses. They tried to cast doubt on the prosecution's evidence and focused on procedural questions. They stressed that there was no direct eyewitness and that the circumstantial evidence could be interpreted in different ways. But the video from the pond was too powerful. It didn't just show Darlene. It showed what she knew. She knew exactly where to look. The verdict. On February 8, 2007, the jury found Darlene Gentry guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to 60 years in prison. The prosecution stated that Darlene acted out of a mix of emotional pressure and money troubles. She wanted to change her life without dealing with the mess of a divorce. The prosecutor warned the jury in his closing speech, "Don't let appearances fool you. Not every angel has wings." After the trial, Darlene Gentry was moved to the Dr. Lane Murray Prison in Gatesville, Texas. She is still serving her sentence there today. In 2017, she asked for a new trial, but the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals said no. Her sentence stayed the same. According to the official records, Darlene can first ask for parole in February 2037. If they say no, she would have to serve her full sentence until February 2067. Darlene still says she is innocent. The children's fate. Keith's parents, Weeman and Glenda Gentry, remain the main caregivers for the three sons, Chase, Cody, and Cade, even after the verdict. In 2010, a court granted them permanent guardianship. A court order forbids Darlene from having any contact with her children. According to court records, she hasn't spoken to them since 2005, the year of the murder. The legacy of Keith Gentry. Keith is remembered by family and friends as a quiet, dependable, loving person. A father who loved his children above all else and always put his family first. He had chosen to live a simpler, quieter life to spend more time with his family, a decision that ultimately cost him his life. His memory lives on in his three sons, who are now being raised by the family who loved him so much. The case of Darlene and Keith Gentry remains one of the most well-known crime cases in Central Texas. A story of love, pressure, greed, and an act that shook an entire community. What seemed like a perfect family life turned into a tragedy, showing how thin the line between happiness and despair can be.